All right, so today we're diving into the world of Judaism.
Yeah.
And the starting point is a YouTube video with a pretty bold title.
Oh, yeah.
Judaism is not what you think.
Definitely eye-catching.
Well, color me intrigued.
It is a provocative title, for sure.
Yeah.
The video's core argument is basically that what most people think of as modern Judaism,
Right.
especially rabbinic Judaism,
Mm-hmm.
is really different from the faith as it was practiced, like
Yeah.
way back during the biblical period.
Okay, so right off the bat, we're dealing with a pretty big claim here.
Definitely a big claim.
Yeah.
And it gets even more intense.
Okay.
The video goes so far as to call
Oh, wow.
rabbinic Judaism demonic,
Yeah.
specifically because of its teachings about Jesus.
Whoa. Okay, that's some strong language.
Very strong.
So where does the video even begin to back up these claims?
Well, they start by tracing the historical development of Judaism.
Okay.
They argue that after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD,
Right.
there's this big shift,
Uh-huh.
and that's when rabbinic Judaism,
Yeah.
which really emphasizes the authority of rabbis
Right.
and their interpretations of Jewish law.
Yeah.
That's when it really took shape.
So it's saying that this version of Judaism is kind of like a later offshoot?
Kind of like a later development, not the original.
Right, not the authentic thing.
Not the original thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And to make their case,
Yeah.
they focus on the Talmud,
Okay.
which is this central text in rabbinic Judaism.
Okay.
It's basically a collection of
Right.
rabbinic discussions
Right.
and interpretations of Jewish law and tradition.
Now, I know a little about the Old Testament,
Right.
but the Talmud, that's pretty new territory for me.
Yeah, for a lot of people it is.
Yeah.
It's a surprise to learn
Okay.
that in rabbinic Judaism, the Talmud is actually considered even more important
Wow.
than the Old Testament.
Okay.
It's seen as the definitive guide
Wow.
to Jewish life.
Okay, so what's so controversial about this Talmud?
Well, the video highlights certain passages
Yeah.
that portray Jesus in a very, very negative light.
Uh-huh.
Like, they describe him as someone who used sorcery
Oh, wow.
to perform miracles and ultimately led Jews astray.
Right.
And some of the language is shockingly derogatory,
Yeah.
even referring to Jesus' mother in a very disrespectful way.
That's intense.
It's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
It sounds like this video maker sees just this huge, unbridgeable gap
Yeah.
between these two versions of Judaism.
Absolutely. They're making the case that they represent two completely different religious systems.
Two different religions.
Yeah. Even using that word demonic to describe the rabbinic tradition.
Yeah, demonic is a very strong word.
It seems like a very harsh judgment.
It is.
But it makes me wonder, how does this video deal with the fact that Judaism and Christianity obviously share some historical roots?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting. The video doesn't shy away from acknowledging those shared elements. They even point out similarities between Second Temple Jewish practices and what we see in early Christianity.
Like what kinds of similarities?
Well, they talk about the importance of synagogue worship.
Okay.
In both traditions. It's the use of incense, the chanting of psalms, and like a similar style of liturgical music.
Right.
They also acknowledge that early Christians would have been very familiar with those elements.
So if they're acknowledging that overlap, how does that fit with this idea of rabbinic Judaism being so different and, in their view, negative?
Well, the video argues that Christianity essentially fulfills and completes the practices found in the Old Testament, specifically those connected to the Second Temple period.
Right.
They're saying it's like a natural progression.
Okay.
Not a break.
So what are some examples they use to support that idea?
Well, they point to things like the Eucharist, replacing animal sacrifices, and the Gospel book replacing the Torah scrolls. So they're saying that Christianity represents a kind of culmination of what was foreshadowed in earlier Jewish practice.
They even mention the importance of apostolic succession in Orthodox Christianity, which I have to admit I'm a little fuzzy on.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Apostolic succession refers to the belief that there's this direct line of ordained leadership stretching all the way back to the original apostles of Jesus. And this unbroken chain of authority is seen as essential in Orthodox Christianity, connecting it directly back to that early Jewish tradition.
So the video is basically saying that Orthodox Christianity has this link to the past, that Rabbinic Judaism, having lost the temple, and the priesthood associated with it, lacks coal.
That's one of their arguments.
Okay.
They're drawing a line from Second Temple Judaism to Orthodox Christianity, while positioning Rabbinic Judaism as separate. And in their view, flawed path.
Right.
And they even take a swipe at Protestant Christianity.
Oh, really?
As they see it. Lacking that same level of continuity with Second Temple practices.
Wow, they're covering a lot of ground here.
They really are.
So from this historical overview, they've set up a pretty clear division.
Clear division.
But where do they go from there?
Well, the next big piece of their argument centers on the idea of Israel. Both as a biblical concept and as a modern nation state. And that's where things get especially controversial.
All right, buckle up, everyone. We're going deep.
Even in the context of this already provocative video.
Let's hear it. What's their take on Israel?
Well, they reject the idea that the modern state of Israel is equivalent to the biblical concept of Israel. They're saying it's not just about a geographical location or a specific ethnic group.
So what are they saying Israel really means?
They argue that it refers to those who have remained faithful to God throughout history. This includes Christians who they believe have been grafted in, to use their term, to this lineage of faith.
So if Christians are included in this definition of Israel, where does that leave modern-day Jewish people who don't believe in Jesus?
That's where the video makes its most controversial claim.
Okay.
They argue that Jewish people who haven't accepted Jesus as the Messiah aren't part of the true Israel.
Yeah.
And that they actually represent the spirit of the Antichrist.
That's a really strong statement.
Yeah, it's a very strong statement.
And it definitely raises questions about the implications of such a belief.
It does.
Especially when we consider the complex history of Jewish-Christian relations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's a reminder that theological ideas don't exist in a vacuum.
No, they don't.
They have real-world consequences.
Real-world consequences.
So this video starts by setting up the stark contrast between what they see as true and false Judaism. They then connect this true lineage to Orthodox Christianity while highlighting practices that they see as fulfilling ancient Jewish tradition. And now they're making bold statements about who belongs to Israel and who doesn't.
It's a bold argument for sure.
Where do they go from here?
Well, next, they dive deep into biblical prophecy. Specifically looking at how, in their view, numerous Old Testament prophecies point to Jesus as the Messiah. And they bring up a lot of specific examples.
All right, let's hear about those prophecies. I'm ready for part 2 of this deep dive.
So they go through a whole list. You know, connecting verses from the Old Testament to events in Jesus's life. For example, they point to Psalm 16.10. Which talks about someone not being abandoned to the grave. And they interpret this as like a clear prophecy of Jesus's resurrection.
That's interesting. But I can already hear some people pushing back on that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Saying that those kinds of interpretations are very specific to a Christian worldview.
You're absolutely right. It's important to acknowledge that these interpretations are definitely rooted in the video maker's Christian beliefs. They're reading these Old Testament passages through the lens of the New Testament.
So what other examples do they give?
Well, they bring up Psalm 118.2224, which describes a stone that's rejected by builders, but becoming the cornerstone. And they see this as like prefiguring Jesus being rejected by Jewish leaders, but ultimately becoming the foundation of the Christian faith. They also point to prophecies about like the Messiah's birthplace, his suffering, and even specific details, like his entry into Jerusalem on a donkey.
It sounds like they're pulling from all over the Old Testament.
Oh, yeah, they really are. They cite Micah 5.2 about the Messiah being born in Bethlehem, Isaiah 7.1 about the virgin birth, Isaiah 53, which describes a suffering servant. They even go back to Deuteronomy, finding hints of Jesus's ministry.
Really?
In passages about a prophet like Moses.
So they're making a pretty extensive case here.
They are.
But I imagine there are other interpretations of these same passages, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jewish scholars, for example, would have very different interpretations of these verses.
Right.
They wouldn't see them as pointing to Jesus.
It's fascinating how the same text can be read in such different ways.
It really
highlights the importance of understanding the lens through which someone is interpreting these ancient writings.
Context is everything. The video even provides a link in the description to a list of 47 messianic prophecies.
Wow.
And their corresponding New Testament fulfillments.
47.
Shows just how deeply they've gone into this whole line of argument.
They're not messing around.
No, they're not.
Okay, so they've covered history. Yeah. They've talked about Israel. They've gone through all these prophecies.
Right.
What else is there?
Well, this is where things get a little more complex.
Okay.
They start talking about what are called theophanies in the Old Testament.
Okay.
And connect this idea to the Christian concept of the Trinity.
Okay. I have to bet theophany is not a word I use every day.
Yeah, it's not a common one.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So a theophany is basically an instance where God appears to humans in some form.
Right.
There are lots of examples in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
God walking in the Garden of Eden.
Right.
Appearing to Abraham as 3 visitors. Speaking to Moses from a burning bush.
I remember those stories, but how do they connect that to the Trinity?
Well, they argue that these theophanies, these appearances of God, were actually pre-incarnate manifestations of Jesus.
Okay.
Who, according to Christian belief, is part of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Right.
They're saying these were glimpses of Jesus.
Okay.
Before he was born as a human being.
So they're essentially saying that Jesus was active even in the Old Testament.
That's what they're arguing.
That's a pretty bold claim.
It is a bold claim.
Yeah.
And they go even further.
Okay.
They interpret the very beginning of the Bible, Genesis 1:1 through 3, as hinting at the Trinity.
Okay.
They see the Father, the Spirit, and the Word, which they identify as Christ, all present in that creation account.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's amazing how they're finding all these connections and layers of meaning within the text.
Yeah, like a whole new way of reading it.
Yeah.
They also bring up the Gospel of John.
Okay.
Which begins by saying, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Right.
They use this to further support their argument.
Okay.
That Jesus, as the Word,
right,
was present at creation.
It's like they're creating this whole new way of reading the Bible.
Yeah.
Finding Jesus hidden in plain sight throughout the Old Testament.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And they even delve into some like fascinating details.
Okay.
Remember that anecdote about the Hebrew name for God, Yahweh?
Oh, yeah.
And its possible connection to Jesus' crucifixion wounds?
Oh, yeah. That one was pretty mind-blowing.
It is interesting.
Like a hidden code or something.
They use details like that to argue that the concept of multiple persons in the Godhead, the idea of the Trinity, actually existed in Second Temple Jewish thought.
Okay.
But was later, like, removed or suppressed.
It's a really intriguing theory. Even if it's hard to prove definitively.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you think about how differently people have understood these core religious concepts throughout history.
Exactly. It challenges us to consider that our own interpretations might not be the only ones.
Right.
Or even the most historically accurate ones.
Yeah. So this video is taking us on this wild ride.
It is.
Through history theology and biblical interpretation.
Yeah.
And all of it is building towards this claim.
Right.
That rabbinic Judaism is not what we think it is.
Exactly.
But they're not just presenting like a dry academic argument.
No.
There's a lot of passion and conviction behind it.
Yeah, you can definitely feel that.
Yeah.
They're not just presenting information.
Right.
They're sharing a deeply held worldview, a way of seeing the world.
Right.
And understanding its history.
And they're not shying away from making some pretty bold,
no,
even controversial statements.
Not at all.
And we're not even done yet.
Nope.
In the next part, they delve into
what they call the literary genius of the Bible.
Yeah, the literary genius.
Drawing parallels between events in Jesus' life and stories from the Old Testament. Okay, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
Let's see what they uncover next.
Yeah.
All right, so they've taken us through history and theology, even some pretty intense biblical interpretation.
Yeah.
Now they're diving into the literary side of things.
Yeah, the literary side.
I'm curious to see where this goes.
So they get pretty poetic here.
Okay.
Talking about the literary genius of the Bible.
Okay.
And pointing out parallels between events in Jesus' life,
right,
and stories from the Old Testament. It's almost like they're uncovering these hidden connections woven into the fabric of the text itself.
Okay, give us an example.
Okay.
What kind of connections are they talking about?
One that really stands out
Yeah.
is the parallel they draw between Eve eating the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden and Christians partaking in the Eucharist.
They present it as this kind of mirror image, two actions with profound consequences, but in opposite directions.
So Eve's action leads to sin and death, while the Eucharist through Jesus leads to salvation.
Exactly.
Okay.
They're presenting Jesus as reversing the curse brought about by the fall.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying that the whole biblical narrative is pointing towards this moment of redemption.
It's a powerful image.
It is.
It makes you think about how stories from different parts of the Bible might be connected in ways we don't always see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to highlight.
Okay.
They even talk about the symbolism of the Garden of Eden with Jesus as the new Adam who comes to restore what was lost.
So it's not just about historical connections. We're finding these deeper thematic links.
Yeah, deeper thematic links.
Between the Old and New Testaments.
Exactly.
What other parallels do they bring up?
Well, they make this really interesting comparison between Pentecost, where the Holy Spirit descends upon the disciples, and the Tower of Babel, where humanity's pride leads to their languages being confused and them being scattered across the earth.
At first glance, those two stories seem completely different.
They do.
What's the connection?
Well, they present it as this idea of inversion and redemption.
Okay.
So the Tower of Babel represents division and separation.
Okay.
While Pentecost represents unity and understanding.
Right.
They're saying that what was broken at Babel is healed through the Holy Spirit at Pentecost.
So it's like Pentecost is undoing the damage of Babel, bringing humanity back together.
That's the argument.
Okay.
And they tied this into their broader point about the universal scope of Christianity's message of redemption.
Right.
Contrasting it with what they see as the more limited ethno-religious focus of Rabbinic Judaism.
Right, they've been critical of that all along.
They have.
Yeah.
They've repeatedly emphasized what they perceive as a focus on acquiring land and maintaining a distinct ethnic identity in modern Rabbinic Judaism.
Yeah.
And they contrast that with their view of Christianity as offering a universal path to salvation, open to people of all backgrounds.
So we've reached the end of the video.
We have.
And I have to say, it's been quite a journey.
It has been a journey.
They've covered a lot of ground, made some bold claims, and really challenged conventional understandings of Judaism and Christianity.
For sure.
They haven't held back.
Not at all.
And in their conclusion, they doubled down on their central argument, calling Rabbinic Judaism a demonic religion that has strayed far from the true faith and blasphemes Jesus. Wow, that's certainly a strong ending.
It is.
It's clear they're not trying to sugarcoat their beliefs, soften their message. No.
For the sake of politeness.
Right.
It makes me wonder how they see their role in all of this.
Yeah.
Are they trying to convert people? Or is it more about just raising awareness?
It's hard to say for sure. They do express a sense of sadness of what they see as the path Rabbinic Judaism has taken.
Right.
Like they're grieving a lost opportunity for their Jewish brothers and sisters to embrace what they see as the truth.
There's a definite emotional element to it.
Yeah.
It's not just an intellectual exercise.
Right.
They clearly feel very strongly about this.
Right.
It reminds me of something you said earlier about theological ideas having real-world consequences.
Absolutely.
This video definitely has the potential to spark strong reactions.
It does.
Both positive and negative.
For sure.
So for our listener who wanted to understand Judaism better, I think this deep dive has given them a lot to consider.
Definitely.
It's certainly not the simple, straightforward answer.
They might have been expecting.
Not at all.
We've encountered a very particular perspective on Judaism, one heavily influenced by a Christian worldview.
Absolutely.
And while it's important to be aware of such perspectives, it's equally important to remember that they represent just one interpretation among many.
One interpretation among many.
Right. This video is just one piece of a much larger and more complex puzzle.
Right.
And it's up to each individual to decide how they want to engage with these ideas and continue exploring the richness and diversity of Jewish thought and tradition.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This deep dive has hopefully sparked some curiosity and given our listener a few new threads to pull on as they continue their own journey of discovery.
Their own journey.
And who knows, maybe it's even inspired them to create their own deep dive.
That'd be great.
Exploring different perspectives and adding their own voice to the conversation. After all, the beauty of learning is that it's an ongoing process.
It is.
And there's always more to discover.
Always more.
Well said.
Thank you.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of a truly thought-provoking topic.
It was a pleasure.